advisory. And I see there's some comments in the chat, Cesar, but so if there's anything I need to notice, let me know.
Sounds good. Yeah, looks like Jan, okay, yeah, just saying, so sorry, Cindy, but yeah, we're good, thank you.
Okay, so just again, some reminders that we shared at our first advisory group meeting, that our meetings are open to the public. We're being recorded. We did put our last meeting up on the Sandag website, and I believe it actually ended up on YouTube also. For these advisory group meetings, only advisory group members and Sandag staff will be able to speak to make sure we have the focus on the data and getting the input here. If you'd like to speak, please raise your hand. If you agree with what another member is saying, you can use the icons to share your approval, and we value your opinions. But sometimes we may need to move the conversations along just because we have a pretty ambitious agenda. So what we're going to be doing today is I really want to make sure that we have such a diverse expert group of individuals here on the advisory group. I'm not sure how many of you got to watch the board meeting, but Supervisor Tara Lawson-Remer really was impressed with everyone who was selected and really acknowledged that we got a great group of people on the advisory committee. So I wanted to kind of give a chance for everybody just to do some open sharing at the beginning, whether it's thoughts about the project, thoughts about what's going on in the community, anything that you think is relevant for this project that you'd like to have an opportunity to share. Then I wanted to talk about the project scope and role of the advisory group. I don't want this to be a frustrating experience for anybody, so I just want to make sure that we're clear about what we can and can't do given the scope of the project, and for those things that we can't do right now, where there's an opportunity to provide that feedback for moving forward. Talk about how we're interacting with each other and engagement moving forward. I really want to make sure this is something where you feel like your voices are being heard, and talk about what meetings look like, and I want your input on that. Let you know where we are in the community survey to date. Share a little bit more with you about like what we're doing with our timeline, the data, getting any more recommendations or thoughts you have on what we've been able to do so far, and then talk about the project timeline. So right now we're at about 4:05. We can go over a little bit more if we want to. I think that yeah. So any open sharing by advisory group members, just really wanted to have a chance if there's anything going on with your organizations, anything in the community, any thoughts on anything that you'd like to share that's not directly related to another agenda item. Betsy, Charlene, Layla, Darwin, Andrea, and Tanya. Oh, Charlene has her hand up. Charlene.
Yes, I just wanted to let the entire group know that this was that Dr. Pella from the county, Andrea Pella, actually talked about the survey, and that it was pushed out through the entire reentry roundtable, and the importance of the feedback and participation of that survey. So I just wanted the entire group to know. And we had on that particular meeting was 50 plus on the meeting, but our distribution list has well over 1,000.
Oh, that's great. Thank you. I'll have some updates for everybody on numbers when we get there.
Just a thought about the governor's budget. Since I work for a state correctional facility in CDCR, looking at the budget, they are looking to close 3 state prisons, 2 this year, fiscal year, 1 the next. That gives a lot of people consternation that work within that system, but looking, stepping back and looking at the broader scope of what that really means for the state of California and for our capacity for incarceration. We're looking to decrease that, not expand that. And so I take that to be something that's worth noting, especially with this group of folks.
Great, thank you.
I was just going to say I had written Cindy a letter. I didn't have it published to all of you with some concerns I had, first of all, about our group and being able to be a little more cohesive if we're going to make good decisions together and be able to have a good discussion. So I did make a suggestion that maybe we could meet face to face if people were comfortable at all, because that might facilitate that. And I had some other concerns, but many of them will be covered, I believe, in this agenda. But I did have thoughts about whether or not we're hitting the right target. And Cindy very well explained to me that at this point, the scope of our task is limited and has limitations. And and many of my concerns, which have to do with really noting the conditions in our jails and prisons and what's going on there and how people are being treated and those kinds of things. It didn't appear to me that we were addressing that. And I wasn't sure in a data-oriented way you can do that, because that can be anecdotal data, but that really gives more, I'm going to use the word flesh, to what the data says about how conditions are. Anyway, I didn't say that very well, but I did want to mention that.
Your email was very thoughtful, and if you're okay, I'm fine forwarding that in my response to everybody on this group, just for transparency. And I did try to really put a lot of the stuff in here for the agenda for us to talk about. So I appreciate your time again, Betsy, on that.
Yes, thank you very much. And yes, you certainly can distribute that to everyone. I apologize for not doing that in the beginning, but I wasn't sure that was appropriate. I'm
I
just learning.
appreciate it. You were very nice in making it clear that it wasn't in any way being a criticism. So I appreciate the clarification, because I want to make sure that we have an open dialogue where everyone feels this is a safe space that we're all trying to do the same, move in the same direction.
Yeah, I understand. And thank you very much.
Did anybody else want to share anything just in an open general sharing before we move on? Okay. So review of the project scope. So this kind of talks about what we were doing, and this kind of speaks to what we were talking about a little bit at the last meeting. Hi, Bill. About what is this group's focus, and I want to commend the county for funding this research and being committed to looking at data. I think this is a unique project in that we really want to compile data that to the best of our ability, knowing that a lot of it is archival, meaning it isn't collected for research purposes. It's, it's something that's just collected for systems. So we're trying to make the best conclusions we can from it, and really wanting to have that emphasis on having community feedback through the community survey, which we'll be talking about this group, having the community forums we're going to be doing. But at the same time, the project scope was so specific, and I'll send out this PowerPoint to everybody, and that actually links to the board item. And I understand if there's frustration that we came to you saying this is what we're doing for this project, and there wasn't an opportunity to share what you thought this project should look like. The opportunity that you're going to have is when we look at this data and you say, you know what, Sandag was able to do this, but we think that these are other areas for research or data or examination that wasn't part of this that needs to be done. And I did share that with the supervisor when we presented to the board on Tuesday, and she wants to get that type of feedback. So we already have the signed contract that's very specific. We are going to try to get an extension potentially to see if we can move it out a couple months, because it is such an ambitious schedule. But I just wanted to let you know that it's not that we don't want your feedback, but that's where we're coming from. And Darwin, I see your hand raised.
Thank you, Dr. Burke. I was there on Tuesday for a few hours, but I did want to say, I guess my confusion is if this group is alternatives to incarceration. I mean, that's language that's literally being used all over the country, and I don't know, I can't tell yet, but I'm hoping that we're going to be on track in that sense what other communities are doing. In that sense, there's already some set practices that are in place that are working all over the country. If it's really in that sense about alternatives to incarceration, and for that matter, the type of data you need to collect to be able to figure out what the best alternatives to incarceration are. So I'm not, and maybe I'm misunderstanding you, but I want to put that part in there.
No, that's one of the things that we are supposed to be doing is compiling best practices, and we're getting staff to do this. If there's input from this group about programs that you know about, that's something that we could discuss in this open forum. That's something that we definitely will, and that's kind of like gets into the next item where how do we best communicate with you, knowing we have these meetings? Does email work? Do you want to meet in person? But that's, I want to use your expertise about if you think that there's a program in San Diego that's working that should be expanded. If you think there's programs somewhere else that San Diego hasn't invested in that we want to bring to the attention of the board through this project, that's definitely something that we want to do.
Well, then, so let me just add real quickly, because putting on my other hat, I'm in the Juvenile Justice Commission, and we're looking at the diversion program for youth and young adults, and that's already taking place through the district attorney's office. And National Conflict Resolution Center has got that contract. And Paco, he's been the former director of it. He's also on the JJC. So I mean, in essence, we've already set up, there's certain things that we've already done and put in place in terms of trying to evaluate the diversion program and how well it's working. So I'm more than willing to share that. And I think it would be pretty similar for what you'd want to do for adults too. And I'd imagine also the diversion program for youth would also fit in with our work, because at the end of the day, it's another alternative to incarceration. That's what we're looking for.
No, definitely. I think you're talking about the JDI program through the DA's office. Yeah, we're evaluating that too, but no, definitely the more that we can do in figuring out how to inform all this. And the board is committed to this. If you saw the, since you were on the board meeting, one of the action items was to expand some of the programs that they already have. So there's like concurrent efforts going on where they are trying to expand things. And we're trying to think about like what data that we might have that could help suggest the different types of programs. Like I haven't seen any analysis, and I don't know if you all have opinions of this. I'm sure you do, since you work with the population of people who may be getting out of jail. But I've heard anecdotally a lot about like what time do people get released from jail, and just getting out on the street with how much money people may have and different things like that. And like, when are the sobering centers open? I know that's one thing that we were trying to look at with the data. Are the sobering centers open at the times that they need to be? You know, so where are there opportunities to suggest services that may not be here, but also how do we reduce any gaps or barriers to services that might be there? So I don't know if you all, that's different areas that I'd love to get your input on.
Well, let me just share real quickly. The biggest divide we have actually is whether or not the diversion program should be directed at the person once they've committed the crime, or should they be beforehand, whether or not they should be arrested in the first place. So if there's a lot of, so for example, if you have status crimes like with curfews, do we need those? In the sense that if someone goes in there and then is diverted, does that make any sense, or should they just not be arrested in the first place? Or should we set it up for people that, for example, commit a felony, need to get on the right track, and then in that sense, the diversion program can provide the service for them, because that person can be in most in need, versus someone that's, say, arrested for breaking a curfew. That's the divide that I've seen so far in terms of how to set up diversion programs or how to deal with alternatives to incarceration in general. And the data would bear that out if you're collecting data.
Yeah, no, and I think I don't know if you all know that like the intercept model and like how there's different stages, and that includes the prevention. So, you know, as we look at like future agenda items here and how these meetings are look and opportunities to discuss, if we want to like dive deep into programs and share information we're finding and have these dialogues, that's something that we can do. We are trying to do these monthly. If we want to, you know, increase frequency, to have some workshops for this group to talk about what we're finding or what you know about, and look at like what are the different opportunities. That's definitely something I want your input on. Okay. Any other thoughts on this? I just want to clarify that if you all have ideas for different things on this project, it's not that we don't want to hear them. It's just that they may need to be for future efforts outside. Okay. Moving along. Perfect segue. So these were questions for you, and these were, you know, inspired by Betsy. So thank you. Do virtual, and so we can kind of go through, and I'd love to have a roundtable discussion. So just what I was thinking about, and Betsy, if I missed anything from what you had communicated, Do virtual meetings work for you, or would you like to see some type of hybrid? I know I miss interaction, and we've never actually I'm sure some of us know each other, but haven't all met together in person as a group. It's easier just to jump on a call. I'd like to continue to make these virtually available for anybody who wants to watch, but we could do a hybrid meeting and see about having it at Sandag if people are interested about that, or we could do it potentially in the community, but I'm just not sure how easy it would be with Zoom and the technology of filming and recording if it wasn't here at Sandag. What recommendations would you make for how the advisory group meetings could best be formatted, including any standing agenda items like the information sharing we put at the beginning of this meeting? What recommendations would you make for how feedback is requested outside advisory group meetings? I don't want to keep filling up your email boxes, but I definitely want you to feel that there's always an opportunity to share your thoughts. And do you have any other suggestions or comments for how this advisory group can best support the project, knowing that we already have some pretty specific direction from the board? So I can start calling. I'd love to get feedback from everybody who's on the committee if you have a chance. I don't know if anybody wants to go first. Charlene?
Hi, Cindy. I think it would be amazing if we could have at least a few meetings, I mean, in person, to be able to meet each other. I understand that, our numbers are starting to move. There's some movement in the numbers again, but I think that, at least us having the opportunity to meet one another in person and then go back to being online again, that hybrid. But I agree with Betsy on that. It'd be nice to be able to meet folks.
We can go question by question. Does anybody else have any opinions, thoughts? Because we could offer the hybrid opportunity for people who don't feel comfortable yet. Tanya?
Yes, I'd like to offer the hybrid for sure, because there are people that maybe don't feel comfortable, but typically with those, I've found, at least in my professional dealings, most people come to the meetings when you have a hybrid meeting. So I'd be happy to do that. And I think it would help with the cohesion of the group, especially since we're just on our second meeting.
Great. Jackie, Bill, Anthony, Layla, anybody else right now? Darwin, Lon?
If I could just add a word of, in my own mind, I think we're doing very important work. There are a lot of lives that will be affected by many of the decisions we could make and how we analyze the data that comes to us. So being a cohesive group that knows how to interact and be together would be so useful to know you personally, which is why the hybrid idea is a great idea. I'm not suggesting in any way that we meet all the time all together, but just have a sense that we have known each other a little bit more. So anyway, that was my thought. Thank you.
Great. Jackie?
Okay, I'm all with sitting down, meeting everybody, because I think that would be good, because this is all good right here, but I'm a interactive person. I like to be where it's at, and so I can express my thoughts. The things you guys talk about and the things that I know doesn't make sense to me. All right. I know what it's like to be locked up. I know what it's like when you come out and you ain't got nothing. I know what it's like starting over. And I know y'all looking for statistics, and I go in and out them jails and I see those women crying every day because they done lost their child because they in the system. Those are things we need to address on how to get these women sober, being able to get their kids back and stuff like that. I understand y'all looking for numbers, but the reality of it is women are suffering as they come out. And that's what you need to address: the addiction, getting jobs, getting a place to live, fighting for their children. Those are the things I think is important. I understand that you guys need numbers and all this type of stuff to make it work or whatever, but I see them women every day and I know what they're going through. I've been through it. So yeah, we all need to sit down so we can all kind of, I think, kind of iron it out and kind of let you know what the real is. Okay, because you guys are looking at numbers per se, but I'm looking at the real. So yeah, we need to sit down together. I'm down for that.
Thank you, Jackie. Okay.
There's a phrase that we used to use in the corporate world, is that I think we're all in violent agreement. So I think it's pretty clear. What I was going to say it. So Sandag and the Board of Supervisors have scoped a certain amount of work, and in a certain way, quite frankly. And there's a purpose for scoping and structuring the work that way. And I think there's an additional, once you get all these smart people together that are all involved in doing the work with the population we serve, there's some obvious and additional information that we would all like to see get to the same ears and eyes that asked for the report. And so in my mind, at the end of the day, an ideal outcome would be that Sandag meets the scope of what they were hired to do. And then there's an extremely valuable and well-received appendix to that data or to that report that is the best thinking of this group that's outside of the scope of the highly specific specified way that they would like to see Sandag go about doing the work. And so I think that the in-person sessions may be best served by us collecting and refining that appendix, as well as giving our input and feedback to the specified scope of work.
I wholeheartedly agree. I think that's a great way to describe it. Okay, so when we look at, I think we all agreed at the last meeting that the 4 o'clock time works for everybody. If we look at this, if we send out dates in June, would you all, if we made it get a hybrid, so some people could do virtual, Sandag is kind of central. I know it can be a pain to come downtown. I'll make sure it's not a Wednesday with a Padre game, or whatever day with the Padre game if you're trying to get in here. That could be a plus, I guess, if you go to the Padre game after the advisory group's over with. Maybe that could be our team bonding activities, go to a Padre game after an advisory group meeting. But just any thoughts on times, if it would be better to have it a little bit later or a little bit earlier for you. And Leila, I see your hand up.
I was going to offer Second Chance. I know we have Bill on the phone, and I'm pretty sure Second Chance has the capabilities for the Zoom broadcasting. And a lot of us, I don't know where we're geographically spread out, but I know a lot of the people I know in here are closer to this area. And downtown is a total nightmare.
Bill, would that be possible to keep it, to do Zoom through you and be able to still record it and go live and everything?
We were successful in doing collaborative court sessions virtually. I worry a little bit about the connection speed of our internet, but on the positive side, we have a huge parking lot. We've got two giant auditoriums. And so let's say I will figure it out.
Okay, and I think we can,
Thank you, Bill.
we can put it out there. Yeah, definitely. Thank you. Where if we want members of the public to be able to come watch again, I just want to make sure that there's total transparency and worst comes to worst, Cesar, we can use our cell phones to record and somehow figure out how to post it. But if everyone's good with that, that sounds great to me.
The only thing that's weird is that we will actually have to have event insurance.
Oh,
We'll
really?
talk about that later.
Okay. We'll figure that out. I think that's a justifiable cost. So moving on, well, I actually just on time would 4 still work for you all live then when we're doing times if I start sending them out, or would you like it a little bit later or a little bit earlier, or does it depend on the day? Any consensus on that?
Earlier is problematic.
Okay, cool. I'll put out a variety of options and we'll see what works best for the majority. So any recommendations for how these advisory group meetings are formatted? I like, Bill, how you said how there's going to be, us sharing data and us getting your thoughts on that. Is there any way, I tried to do the opening, just open data sharing at the beginning. I guess, does anybody have any thoughts right now about how we can best format these agendas so it is, a collaborative effort to describe what's going on in the project and your thoughts in general? Again, maybe trying to use that model of where there are opportunities to change how things are done in San Diego County and look at prevention and maybe have more formatted discussions as part of each agenda about what we think are needs and gaps. I think as we get more of the data going regarding the community survey, as we're looking at the services and doing some more of those analysis, it might, add numbers to what you already know. And I see Darwin's hand up.
We just says time at the beginning of the meetings for just like open discussion about the agenda or anything folks are confused about or want to discuss more, like just a certain amount of time at the beginning.
Definitely. Layla, is your hand up from before? Did you have more thoughts on this?
Sorry, let me put my hand down. Thank you.
Okay. Did anybody else have any thoughts they want to share about the agenda, or just so we can see what's going on with each phase of the project and go from there? Bill?
I probably missed it, or maybe you can just remind me where I can find it. What would be helpful for me is if I could see the agenda for the meeting before the meeting. And I don't know if it's on the website already and I just didn't look, or.
Yeah, I sent it out, I think 2 days ago.
Yes, it was in the email, Cindy.
Is there any way we can get more lead time than 2 days? Because for me, it's going to be a looking at it over the weekend, and because that's when I'm not doing my day job.
No, definitely. I will do that so that at least a week before the meeting, you can get that.
Okay, now here's the controversial question I have.
Mm-hmm.
For me, because I'm a data nerd, like if we're going to be looking at data and giving feedback on data, I actually would like the source data so I can mess with it and do a different pivot table and change the graph a little bit to see if there's insights and things like that. Am I crazy?
You're not crazy, and I love that you're a data nerd. The only problem is with some of the data, like for the community survey data, if you want to see that data, I can send it to you. Our problem with the other data is that we don't even get to download it. It's in this, it's something called the MAI. And so we have to like go into the sandbox and the share system, and we can't take the data out. So that data we can't pass on, but like if you're looking at the data and you think of other ways to analyze it or look at it, I could totally geek out and talk about that with you for as long as you want to. So, yeah, no. Yeah. So if there's ways to do that, you just got me all excited talking about pivot tables. So. Yeah, so any data that we can share like that, we definitely, and I think like when we get to the gap analysis with the services, if we're looking at the data on where services are in the community and like mapping and different things like that, that's something that we could potentially look at. We're trying to get probation data because of HIPAA regulations. Any assessment data that's done with people who are already booked into jail, we don't have access to. So we're trying to see if from the Compass assessment through probation, and it's obviously a subsample of people, but at least to try to get some of the need we did. I think I sent you all the initial interim report, the full one, and you can see we had to use a lot of proxy measures of need from our study where we go into the jails and talk to individuals trying to get at the whole housing instability, mental health, substance use. And so what recommendations would you make for how feedback's requested? So I will definitely try to give you more lead-in time on some of that, give you the data. Does anybody else have any other thoughts about reports or emails or the best way to communicate with you all? Any feedback's appreciated either now or whenever you think about it. And anybody else before we kind of move on with the agenda? Because I'm excited to tell you about the community survey. And all good? Okay. How are we doing time? So we're at 4:30.
Just a quick question, Cindy,
Yes.
for the group. Was Was anybody else, I know Darwin, you said you were able to be at the meeting for a few hours, but was anybody else able to view either real time or the video of at least the ATI portion of the supervisor meeting?
I have actually the link. I don't know. Did you get a chance to see it? Because I have the
I
link.
did, yeah.
Oh, good.
And
Oh, yeah.
yeah.
Any input you have or thoughts on that would be, I think that's, I have it as a later agenda item, but if we want to talk about it now, and I can send the
Okay.
link to anybody who wants to see it. It's like at 3 hours in. I was
Yeah.
I was kind of giddy that we got to go before lunch. I was scared we were going to be put on hold because we were there a long time.
I missed
Did
it.
you-
I would definitely like to see it.
Okay, I'll send it. I will definitely send it to you. Did you have any thoughts on, I thought it went pretty well, I think.
Yeah, I do have, my thought is that, my general thought is that it would be great for us to be able to watch it. And moving forward to be able to view any sort of
Oh, I think-
reports that are given. It's good to know sort of where the supervisors are, what they're thinking about, with the questions that they answered or asked rather, and you know, on the work that we're doing. So it was very helpful.
No, I will send out the link to this, and then if we get done early, I can start playing it and sharing my screen if for anybody who wants to like start seeing like the introduction that the supervisor did to the item. You can hear how I described the data in the PowerPoint, and then you could also hear the questions she asked at the end, which I think that's a great idea to share that. Andrea?
Yeah, hello, I hope you can hear me. I watched most of the supervisor meeting yesterday. I did watch your presentation. There was a lot of information to take in a very short amount of time, and I understand you didn't have a lot of time to present the information. Probably one of the things that stood out to me the most was, and correct me if I took away this information incorrectly, that the majority of bookings, I believe it was for the year 2021, the majority of bookings was for just a 3-day duration. Did I understand that correctly yesterday?
So, yes, and if I haven't sent you the PowerPoint that I think I did, but I'll send it to you again when I send out this link here. So we looked at length of stay pre-COVID and during COVID, and we looked at it by booking charge, and then we also looked at it by race, ethnicity. We looked at like the level of the offense. We looked at both the mean and the median, and it's about a quarter of people, 23%. I'm sorry, I'm closing. I can think better when I close my eyes. 23% were in less than 1 day pre-COVID, 29% during COVID. And so that would lead to one of my kind of takeaways that I put at the end of saying, you know, a lot of people are just booked in and out. And so are there better ways of not even booking them into jail for some of these offenses? But yeah, the median time was typically, you know, 3-4 days. It varied by booking charge. Obviously, violent offenses and weapon offenses were longer. But after, I can pull that slide up from the other presentation to stop sharing and share again if we want to talk about that data today.
Can you do that, Cindy? I would like to see that.
Okay.
And thank you, Cindy. And I think that as we move forward with this group and as we continue to discuss, I think we do have to include conversations around the police departments and how officers engage individuals out in the community, because obviously they are the ones who arrest citizens and members of our community and take them to the jail. So I think we need to inevitably also talk about police practices.
Yeah, no, I think that, again, I think that's something could be in that appendix idea that you all have, since that's beyond like the jurisdiction of the county. But I think if there's feedback and thoughts here from this group, this is definitely an opportunity to share that. And that's something that we could do. Let me just make sure I pulled the right PowerPoint. Do you want me just to skip to the that slide, or do you want to kind of run through it, the whole thing?
I don't know. What does the group think?
I'd like to go through the whole thing if we could quickly. and then get to that place personally.
Okay. Okay, I'm gonna go really, really fast and know that you can see it more on the YouTube video. Am I sharing again? Okay.
Yes.
Okay, let me just go to the slideshow. So there's the pictures. Thank you for who shared pictures. We talked about our meetings. We talked about the community survey, so I'm going to get to the data. This is in the slide, and again, I'll send you this whole PowerPoint so you don't need to worry about like what questions we could answer, what we had to answer with a proxy, and which questions we could not answer. All of these questions were very specific in what was specified, and again, the original scope of work where this is what we were told that we had to answer as part of this project. This just shows jail bookings, how they dropped pre-COVID to during COVID. Pre-COVID, the monthly average number of bookings was just over 6,600, and during COVID, that dropped down to about 3,800. We went out and did interviews with different people in the system about what were the policy drivers of reduced incarceration. The supervisor originally wanted us to be able to say that this one change in policy led to this amount of decrease in jail bookings. And it really was impossible to say that because people may come in for multiple reasons. They might have other things that happen once they're in. Policies were changing from the local and the state level, depending on what was going on with rise and falls in COVID numbers. But this is all the different things that we kind of summarized affected the jail numbers during the period of the pandemic. This shows the monthly average number of individuals housed in Sheriff's Department detention facilities. And we had to get this was a proxy measure because we couldn't actually get this data in the what we call the hub because it's always constantly changing, and the database is something that it updates every night. So saying what percent or who was sentenced or unsentenced is constantly changing. And then somebody could be sentenced for one crime and then unsentenced, you know. But the takeaway that I shared in the presentation was that most of the individuals who are housed in sheriff's facilities, both pre-COVID and during COVID, were there for a highest charge that was a felony. All of the groups did decrease in population number pre-COVID to during COVID. And the smallest decrease though was for unsentenced felons, and those also make up the greatest percentage of the jail population. Some other changes that were from pre-COVID to during COVID, a greater proportion of the jail population was there for felonies or violent offenses, a smaller proportion for drug offenses or warrants. This shows what are the top 20 charges that individuals are booked into jail. And this could be any charge, it's not just the highest charge. And you can see that I don't have my speaking notes in front of me, so I'm doing this by memory. 8 are alcohol, drug, 6 are violent, 3 are property, and 3 are some type of violation. The ones that are highlighted are the top 6. And they pretty much stayed the same again from pre-COVID to during COVID. The biggest drop was possession of a non-narcotic drug, which includes methamphetamine, and that went from 12% to 2%. And here's the length of stay information. So the bars show what was the mean length of stay in days pre-COVID and during COVID. The pink line is the median. And I apologize if I insult anybody, but the mean is when you take every number and you add it and then you divide by the number of cases you have. That works great if there's a bell-shaped curve where it falls very few people at either end and there's a bigger amount in the middle. If you look at like housing prices, they'll talk about the median, and that's what number is right at the 50th percentile, because there could be a few number of houses that are really expensive in La Jolla and Del Mar and Rancho Santa Fe that raise up the mean. And that's the case here. We did not include anybody who stayed more than 166 days per the Sheriff's Department because they could be outliers. But you could see that pre-COVID, not surprisingly, this is what I kind of started saying, weapons and violent offenses had a mean of 21 and 27, but you could see that just the median was 3, 6. It was 3 for drug offenses, 4 for property, 1 for other. And then during COVID, they all went down, both the mean and the median. The one exception was property crime, that the median stayed 4 days, both pre-COVID and during COVID. And this is these next data, I'm sure would love to have more feedback from you all on this. This shows differences pre-COVID and during COVID by race ethnicity. You can see that all the groups did decrease in the mean and the median, except for other, which was 1 day, both pre and post, or pre and during. But there was disparities with Black African American and Asian Pacific Islanders having longer lengths of stay. And I then shared about disparities that we all know. This is not new data to anybody. Looking at the blue bar is the San Diego population. The burgundy bar shows what the pre-COVID jail population looked like in terms of race, ethnicity, and then during COVID. So you can see for Black African Americans, 5% of the population up to 15, it went up slightly to 16% during COVID. Hispanic, Latino, Latina went from 34% to 38 pre-COVID to 41%. So we did see some higher disparities there. This slide shows what the highest booking charge was by ethnicity. And what I tried to make really clear when you see the presentation is there was a differences pre and during. You can see that white individuals were more likely than the other groups to be arrested for the pink bars or drug offenses, and that the Black, Asian Pacific Island or other were more likely to be arrested for violent. So there is differences here. I try to make it really clear that these differences in what individuals will work for by race does not account for all the variance. It's not doing a logistical regression. It doesn't say anything about what the base rate is in the population of actual behavior. It's not saying that that individuals who are white are not committing violent offenses and just not getting booked into jail for it. And I said it definitely is something that we need to continue to talk about, because equity and disparity in the justice system is something that I think this group definitely needs to talk about, but we wanted to be transparent with those differences. This is where we had to answer data with a proxy. They wanted us to be able to talk about those who had a substance use disorder, mental health issues, or homelessness. As part of a project we conduct called SAM, we go into jails and get a random urine sample that we're able to test for drugs. We've been doing that since 2000. It can't be tied back to the individual at all. It is voluntary, confidential, and we also ask a number of different questions. So and we test for marijuana, opiates, meth, amphetamines, cocaine, crack, and PCP. And you could see that in 2020, the purple line is males. 82% of males tested positive for at least one drug. The percent of females went down from 82 to 67%, which was obviously one of the biggest drops we've typically had for a lot of years. Females are more likely to test positive than males. The primary drug of use, this shows the percent that were positive for meth. And so in 2020, we had 57% of the males booked into jail tested positive, 53% of the females. Regardless of what charge somebody was booked for, we had a smaller number of people that we interviewed in 2020 just because of COVID safety protocols, but these data are consistent across the years. It doesn't matter what somebody's arrested for. It's not like only individuals who are arrested for a drug offense were positive for meth. So really trying to show the board just what a high level of need there might be there. This is us asking the arrestees, the individuals who are incarcerated that we talked to, have you ever stayed overnight for mental health treatment? And you could see 31% of those in 2020 who were booked into jail that we talked to said that they had ever diagnosed for a mental health or psychiatric disorder, 37%. And when I presented this data to the board, I also made it clear then that this is probably an underestimate, because it's just people who actually did get services, not those who might have a need that has not been diagnosed yet. We asked the individuals if they were primarily homeless in the last 30 days, and this could be whatever they define as homeless. We don't make them specify. So it could be couch surfing, it could be on the street, it could be in a car, it could be wherever. We ask if they've ever been homeless. You can see the percent went down in 2020. You said they were primarily homeless in the last 30 days. And my speculation was this could be related to maybe opening up some of the beds or motels during COVID to try to get people off the street or in the convention center. But 70% of those who were booked said that they were ever homeless. Primarily homeless. This shows by the offense charge, and this was a significant difference that those who were arrested had a highest booking charge for a property offense, were more likely to say that they were primarily homeless or ever homeless. And this is some interesting data, and I believe I shared this with you before we updated the numbers, but just to kind of remind you, we were directed, this was a very specific question, looking at pre-COVID and during COVID, looking at somebody's first booking, did they get any county funded services for substance abuse or mental health in the 18 months prior to being booked? And you can see we had just almost 88,000 individuals booked. 16% of those had received county funded treatment in the 18 months prior. Most of those had not received it. This could either mean that they got other privately funded treatment or they got no treatment at all. You can see it was more likely to get mental health treatment, 20% got substance use only, 14% got both. But when you look up at that top, out of that, all those individuals that almost 88,000, only 13% overall got mental health treatment, only 5% had ever gotten substance use treatment that through a county funded service provider, again, in that 18 months prior. This next slide shows the same data for during COVID. And the takeaway here is that there was even a smaller percent, only 11% had gotten any type of treatment, 10% mental health, and only 2% substance use. And then the other analysis that we were directed to do was seeing if those who had gotten treatment had more than one booking into jail. And so you can see the pre-COVID data, 67% of those who had received treatment had more than one booking. During COVID, there were smaller percentages, obviously, because there was less law enforcement contact in general, proactive policing, people being booked into jail. And I made it really clear in my speaking points that this does not mean that you get treatment and you're more likely to go to jail necessarily. Obviously, there are people who have needs, and receiving treatment is not the best indicator of having an underlying need, but that it did seem that there is something to examine here about, obviously underlying need can lead to ongoing contact with the system, especially when it's addressed or not addressed. And so the takeaways, just very generally here, knowing that this does not reflect all the community feedback that we're hoping to get, but that just really talking about the substance use issues and the mental health issues and making sure that we're making sure there are programs available to address these needs. I think, Andrea, this is what you were saying, most individuals in jail for less than 3 days. So researching best practices and programs that would be more cost effective than just booking somebody in for a short period of time, sobering centers or whatever we might have out there. That median length of stay for property crime offenders not going down, and then knowing that there's a higher self-reported history of housing instability, and how do we look at that length of detention and why did it not go down, and how do we best meet the housing needs of the population. Acknowledging that most individuals who are incarcerated are there because of a felony. The supervisor's very interested in trying to keep those jail numbers down, but still there are a lot of people in jail who are in that population. So regardless of if there are individuals who are going to be incarcerated, how do we make sure that we're still providing the best reentry services for them when they do get out? And then trying to get at the whole thing about some of the data not being available, the timeline for this project, and just making sure that they were aware of that. So, and this is one of the slides that's in your presentation of what we're doing next. So I'll just let you get there. So I'm going to stop sharing this unless anybody wants me to go back to a slide, because I know we have a lot of other stuff in the other PowerPoint. And I'm sorry I talk so fast, but you can watch the video too. Do I have any questions for anybody that I can answer? Yes, Darwin.
Well, it's not quite, but one of the things, of course, is this is a whole lot of stuff. And so I just want to put out real quickly, my first thought right off the bat is in terms of how to organize, if something like us having subgroups or work groups to be able to, in terms of areas of interest, to be able to work through this material more carefully and closely. And then also if there's staff and public safety that we can meet with in terms of digging into this, that might be very useful for us.
I think that's a great idea. Do you have any thoughts on how those subgroups could best be divided just by looking at this right now, or?
I do actually.
I thought you would. What are they?
Property offenses jumped out, certainly drugs, alcohol. And then I don't know if in terms of a subgroup, it's certainly race too. And then also I know folks that are in rehab, as well as regional task force on homelessness, that this is going to interface with too.
You started coming in and out a little bit. I got drugs,
Okay.
alcohol as one group, race as another one, and then I didn't catch the rest.
Property offenses,
Okay.
one of the ones that jumped out.
Did anybody else have any other thoughts about any other groups that I think that's a great idea to try to get into this a little bit more.
Cindy, I'd like to see once that feedback comes back, right? The number from the what the surveys come back as.
Oh, yeah, no,
No,
once we get that data, I think that I'd love to share that with all of you, and that might be, I don't want to take advantage of too much of your time, but I think that giving you a chance to look at that and then seeing if there's other data to look at as we run with it, sharing the qualitative feedback, that could be kind of if we have more than one meeting, I definitely want to make sure that we have enough ample time so you don't feel rushed on that one at all. Any other thoughts on this, or are you good for me to go back to the other presentation? Close that one. Let me share again. Okay. Okay, so I think we're a little bit behind, but I think this was a very good detour for productivity and where we're going. So just to give you an update on the survey. So we did get it out in the Union Tribune. We've been doing social media. Thank you for your assistance in getting it out. Thank you, Bill, for helping us pre-test it. Andrea Pella is going out and has and I hope she followed up with you, Tanya, on the prisons. Did she, or do I need to nag her? She never did?
Need to nag her.
Okay, I'm gonna nag her. So we are getting it into the jails, and we're supposed to be going to the probation facilities. It was supposed to be distributed through the county libraries and parks. I nagged our Sandag communications people and had them put it up at our bike to work day if you saw any bikers around. We did get it in the Union Tribune. And so right now we have 1,600 surveys as of Tuesday. The survey is supposed to close tomorrow, but I got the okay from the county to keep it open one more week. So if you all can do reminders, we're trying to really, I'll send you all an update tomorrow on how many we have. This does not include any paper surveys that may have been handed out, and that's where I know that the ones that were going out to the jail and the detention facilities was on paper. Andrea had also gone outside the court to try to hand it out, so she has not gotten those back to me. We are hoping to extend it. Looking at the data real quickly without cleaning it at all. And again, this doesn't include the people who have the paper surveys. About 1 in 10 said that they were previously incarcerated who did the survey. About 1 in 3 say that a family member had been. Slightly more female respondents. We find this typically with a lot of surveys. The average age of the people who did it was older than I think the average age in the region's about 35. Whenever we do any type of community survey, it seems like it's old, like older individuals are more likely to be doing the surveys. You could see the breakdown on the race. I forgot to put white on there, but over representation of white Caucasian, given the proportion, you can see a lower rate of Hispanic, Latina, more likely to have a degree. So definitely we do not have a random sample of the population, which we've been saying the whole time. So definitely want to try to get it out through as many other venues as possible. So if anybody else has any other ideas for how we can do that in the next week. We ask people for zip codes, and zip codes don't perfectly align with areas of the county. There's different areas when you look at a county map called the MSAs. So the central region, we have about 26% are people who said that they live in the central region, 23% North City, 17 in east or east suburban, 13% are from the South Bay, 12% from North County West, and 10% from North County East. So that's the data that we have on the community surveys right now. So we're trying to get it out there as much as we can. I'll give you an update on the numbers, but if anybody can do any other final pushes, that would be great. And I'll bug Andrea with Tanya. We tried to get it on nextdoor.com, but there was no way to do it through like one central source, and you needed to like tie it. And so that was an unsuccessful effort, but we did get it in the UT. And we did ask the board supervisors to send it out too. Does anybody else have any ideas or feedback?
Wish we had had a QR code for that.
We do have a QR code. I sent it out, but I can send it again.
Ah.
Yeah, that was on the,
Which one was?
so right there.
Oh, yeah. Okay.
Yeah. So if anybody needs any flyers or anything else, we could arrange to get those to you. That's what we're trying to do, so someone could just do it on their phone. Andrea?
Yeah, I just wanted to mention real quick, I actually sat with a friend of mine last night and asked him to complete it on my computer because he couldn't do it on his phone. And he had a real hard time. He doesn't fall into, the demographic that has been completing the survey, it seems. And so he had a really hard time clicking through the survey. And also at the end, when he tried to submit it, an error message popped up. So I was wondering if you guys are aware of any sort of technology issues with this survey, or it could have been something on my end, obviously, but I just wanted to ask if that's something that you have heard from others, perhaps?
We haven't. We did a lot of pre-testing internally with both the English and Spanish, and then we're grateful Bill's, we incorporated feedback from Bill with his clients of doing the survey. We haven't gotten any feedback on the ATI email or anything that I'm aware of. Cesar, have you gotten any feedback that you're aware of?
No, not of that issue. I'm wondering if that was your internet
It
connection.
could have been,
Yeah,
absolutely,
yeah.
yeah.
But
Just
no,
one little thing I wanted to share, one observation. So there is, I believe on the second or the third page, there are items where it says, and I don't exactly remember the item specifically, but it says, if this does not apply to you, please enter NA into the box. And he overread that multiple times. And so I think if you don't enter NA into the box, you can't proceed to the next page. And so I'm just wondering if, that additional step of asking people to enter NA into the box, that may be preventing them from ultimately completing the survey. If they get frustrated, like they click on the next button and it just doesn't go to the next page, and eventually they abandon it. So that was just
we had to make the judgment call on that. When you do SurveyMonkey, if somebody says other, if you with the open-ended responses, there's no, if you want to make sure that they describe what that other is, you need to have them enter something there. And so if we didn't do that, we were scared that we'd get a lot of people who just said other and we wouldn't know what that other was.
Yes, yeah. So just an observation I wanted to share.
No, thank you. I appreciate that. Manuel, I see your hands up. Did you want to share? I'm not sure if you're still on mute.
Yes, sorry for joining late. I was gonna say I had someone who had a similar experience who basically had an issue going through the survey several times because they couldn't leave the box blank. So it was just like having to go back and fill something in. Like I think they tried to do a survey like 2 times and they just kind of like weren't able to do it until I got like to sit down with them. So I think that was a barrier that like folks were facing.
Okay.
And sorry that I joined late, but I do have a question. Is there like was it mentioned like how many folks have been impacted by incarceration completed the survey? And then if we're doing a last push, is the deadline still tomorrow? Is it being extended?
Yeah, so we have 1,600 right now. 11% of the individuals as of Tuesday had said that they had a history of incarceration, but that does not include any of the paper surveys that have been distributed through probation or outside the court or in any of our local detention facilities. So I expect that that'll be higher in the final number. And we did get the okay from the county to extend this till June 3rd. So we have another week to try to get any other last chances. And if anybody wants paper surveys, I sent the PDF out, but we're happy to make print copies for you if you think those are easier for people to fill out. Okay. We're at 5 o'clock, so I'm going to keep moving unless anybody else has any questions or thoughts on the survey. But we'll definitely make sure you have enough time to look at it. Oh, we already did a lot. This is highlights from the presentation. So I'm gonna just go to the next slide and then we can come back here and then whatever we want to talk about for the next 30 minutes. So I shared the PowerPoint to the board. We could also, if we have time at the end, if you want to see me do the presentation again, or I could try to fast forward to get to the supervisor's comments at the end so you could hear that. Maybe that might be a good discussion point. But just so you kind of know where we're going with the project. So our big step right now is to get the community survey done and get it analyzed. We were going to be holding the community forums in June, but we really wanted to have some of the information from the community survey to be done. We're looking at doing 4 in June going into July. We were going to do them virtually for about an hour and a half. Originally, we talked with the county about doing them focusing south and east, central, northwest, and then northeast. But if they're virtual, I'm not sure if a geographical specification, anybody could get on anyone and share their feedback. We didn't know if we should just say that there's 4 opportunities to participate in a community forum. Going along what Darwin kind of said, do we want to say that this one's going to be focused on talking about mental health or reentry or substance use? So I guess, does this group have any thoughts on how we just make them general? Do you think they should be specific? We were going to give anybody who calls in a chance 3 minutes to speak public comment, and they would be recorded and be open. And then time-wise, we were thinking again, the Prop 47 committee, Charlene, I don't know if you have thoughts on that. I think that you've had success with like a 5:30 time frame for that, like 5:30 to 7. We didn't know if we wanted to have one like at lunchtime in case there's people who can't do nighttime. So any thoughts you have on how we organize these 4? I was going to try to do them different days of the week, like one on a Monday, one on a Tuesday, one on a Wednesday, one on a Thursday, and then time-wise. So what do you think, Charlene, and anybody else?
Yes, because also the other, not CCP meetings, but we did have some other meetings that were in Oceanside and, Central. I think that was part of the Prop 47. And so they did have them at some different times. And it really worked because some folks who couldn't maybe get to Central did go to East County, right, for those meetings. So I think switching up the days and switching up the times, but I do know, as Bill had mentioned earlier with his day job, that time frame, that 5:30 to 7 seemed to work really well for a lot of other folks. So we've kept that with Prop 47.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts about the community forums when we get them up and going?
Are they going to be fully virtual or?
We were going to do that just because, again, to make it easy for people to get on. I think with the Prop 47 ones, Charlene, those were fully virtual, weren't they? At least more recently.
Yes, we are still virtual, and we have quite a few folks, and we push that out through the reentry roundtable as well. So, but we do have a lot of the public come to those meetings as well.
If I can ask what the format will be. I've gone to like several meetings, where folks want to engage community, and they end up doing like a 1-hour presentation and then just leaving like 15 to 30 minutes for questions or comments. And sometimes that's like pretty exclusive of community members because sometimes they don't have a whole hour to wait to ask questions or comments. So I do kind of like the idea of like maybe focusing on topics in case if like the presentation is the same. And then I also am concerned with maybe like saying that we're limiting folks to 3 minutes. Because then like people who want to have their time like valued might need more than 3 minutes.
So the reason we were thinking about limiting it to 3 minutes was just to make sure that everybody who gets on has a chance to speak. And I guess if we got to the end and people didn't have enough time and wanted more, so that was why we were trying to do that. So it wasn't like an awkward, if someone, we know that there were, 50 people who wanted to speak. I wasn't going to have a big presentation if we had a few slides, just kind of sharing some of the information from the community survey, if you think that would be a good conversation starter, but we don't even need to present those to the community forum. I really wanted this to be a chance where the community could feel heard. So I wanted to use as much of the time as possible for actually public speakers. Betsy, I see your hand up. You're on mute. You're on mute, Betsy.
There we go. I'm on mute. So at the forums, will there be questions that will be posed to the community in such a way so that people can speak to various questions? Or I'm trying to picture what this could be like. And
Yeah, it's we could. I want to make sure that it's a chance for people to share information. That's why I thought originally we would share some of the data that we got from the community survey. We could share some of the data that we've analyzed, like in this interim report. But again, I don't want to take away from the opportunity. So I think it's a chance for the community to share any thoughts they have about incarceration, public safety, service gaps, needs, barriers to service, alternatives, programs, what's needed, their experience with the system. So really just a chance because we've offered other opportunities to share feedback, through email or electronic, but just to have more of a voice behind the other opportunities.
Well, I could see that. I would just think that if there were like 3 broad questions posed so that people could speak to those and go off into their own thoughts. I don't know that, I don't know about the community, but I'm not sure that the data will be as interesting to them as the speaking to the questions. That would just be my thought.
Do you have any thoughts on what questions would be good? And would we want to make the same questions that, or different questions at each of the different events? Or if anybody has thoughts, if we want to go that direction, what those questions might be?
I don't have them right this second, but I certainly will think about them as now that you've raised this.
No, that's great. I'll think about it too, and then put some out, and then hopefully we can have a discussion. Darwin, your hand's up.
Yeah, I would just add, my concern is if we have, in terms of direction we're going in and data that we're exposed to, I think we should be open and transparent about that, in the sense that if folks are coming to chime in and then we end up basically moving in a completely different direction than what the discussion's about, there's going to be a lot of resentment directed at us. So I think we need to be clear that if we're moving in a particular direction and we've got access to certain data, that we also find ways of sharing that with the community too.
So you think there would be interest in the data that we've collected so far and sharing that publicly with them?
Yeah, especially if at the end of the day, where we end up is very different than what we're getting from the community. So yes, I do think we need to find some way to put it out there in a digestible, clear way. Some kind of brief presentation.
Does anybody else have any other thoughts on the community forums and what they look like?
I guess one question I have is like, how is the outreach going to be made, and like who are we targeting? Like who do we have in mind should be there?
So I thought we would do something similar to what we had done with the community survey. We're hopefully utilizing this group, making sure it got out in the county information sources, social media, the same way that we were trying to get people to know about the survey. So the snowballing method is, people tell each other. So however we can get the word out the same way that we did for the survey. Betsy? Oh, I'm sorry. I thought you were done. What do you
Oh,
think?
no, I'll let Betsy go and then I can go back.
Okay. Oh, you're all good. Okay. Did you have other ideas, Manuel?
I guess my concern mainly is, hearing that so far, out of 1,600 surveys, only 11% of them, folks reported they have been impacted by incarceration. I think that gives me a sense that we might not have a high turnout of folks who have been impacted by incarceration at these forums. And so I'm also, I want to make sure that we're intentional and how accessible we make it to community members who, sometimes don't have the time to join these things or don't have the resources, don't have, the daycare to take, or the daycare to take time off, from watching their kids. Because something that was actually brought up to me by someone who I wanted to fill out the survey but was impacted was that they didn't feel comfortable like filling out the survey. And they shared that, they were being asked to provide information to the county, but there was no support for them. There was no incentive for them. So there was a lack of trust there.
So does anybody have any ideas how we can get around that? No? Crickets, awkward silence. We can all kind of try to think about it. We definitely want to make sure that Bill, are you turning your camera on because you have some ideas?
I have one of those questions that when people ask questions like that, like this, sometimes it's not helpful, but what's the point of the community forums? Like how does it relate to the scope of the statement of work from the Board of Supervisors to SANDAG? Like, what are we hoping to get out of the community forums?
So we're going to do 4 community forums now, and then there were going to be 2 later on. What was requested in the original request for proposals was that this was data driven, but that the community had a chance to comment on the data that we have and also recommendations that are made. And so that's when we first put together our proposal. We suggested, one way to get community feedback is through the community survey. And then also giving chances for people, if they didn't want to do the survey, to come speak at a forum to share their views. So I do agree that given that, it does make sense for them. We're a little bit early with some of the recommendations since we're still collecting so much of the data. But again, just trying to see what their perspective, like when Betsy was just saying, what questions would we ask them? I guess what I would love to know is, what was the effect of incarceration on your family? What services what services did you need but weren't easy to get? What were the barriers to getting those services? For individuals perhaps who, and I apologize if I'm not using the right semantics here or words, but who have successfully re-entered or feel like that they've whatever their underlying issues have been were successfully addressed, like what made the difference, in terms of, so again, trying to think about if we're making recommendations for programs or policies to the county supervisors and see what feedback we get from community and how does that align with the data that's there, and can they support each other to not just have numbers, but tell a story.
Okay, so what you're describing really is additional data, not really feedback on the data that we have compiled. Right?
Well, I'd love to have both. I feel like we're going to have those 2. I feel like it's a little bit early on the recommendations at this point, because you could see the data that I had, like I was trying to say what it is. I'd like it to be an iterative process both ways. So if somebody has thoughts on any of the data, we can share, like the presentation we just did at the board. Maybe I could talk with you all about what data is most interesting to share with that group. But I feel like there's going to be a lot more coming down the line with, you know, the needs and the best practice review and stuff like that. I don't know. What do you think we should be focusing on?
Well, I'm just thinking of starting with the purpose in mind, right? So if the purpose of the community forum is to get feedback on the data that we've collected so far, because we don't really have recommendations yet, then what we shouldn't do is show it on a slide for 5 minutes and then ask people to talk about what they think about the data. That doesn't work I don't think, for anybody. What we should probably do is have the community forum and have for 20, make posters like you would at like a pharmaceutical conference, where people walk around and when they look at studies and new drug proposals and things like that, they have the information available that people can study it for a little while, and then you ask for feedback on the right. So people can't consume the information on a screen in 5 minutes and then really give any meaningful feedback on the data that they just saw for 5 minutes. Does that make sense? And
Yeah.
so
Do you think that maybe we should have at least one of the forums, like since you're talking about that poster kind of session, if we have it like at a place like Second Chance or a more live? See, now you're going to regret offering.
Yeah, I know. I'm regretting it already, but I think somehow we want to design, if our purpose is for the community to see the data and give feedback, we have to present the data in a way that will get valuable feedback. And so that I'll just leave it there. And then the other thing about the stories and the lived experience, descriptions of lived experience to refine future recommendations, I think we just have to be really clear about asking, we would like you to come and give us, descriptions of your lived experience, so to refine our future recommendations, right? Not just put it out, there's a public meeting, we're looking for community feedback. I think we have to be more specific about what we're asking for and what we're going to do with it. Because then I think we'll get more people who have valuable input show up and less people in tinfoil hats.
I think that's great. Thank you. Charlene, I'm not sure if Charlene or Andrea had their hand up first. So
Andrea did before me.
Okay, Andrea.
Thank you, Charlene. So on the question about how we can increase trust in this data collection, I believe that Manuel brought up the question, how can we incentivize individuals to complete the survey when they have concerns about what will happen with this data or where it may go. This is the same conversation I had with my friend last night, who is not, he is justice impacted, and he really does not understand much about, community organization, county level stuff, and, sort of the sphere that we all sort of roam in as part of our day-to-day function. He has very little understanding of that. And so I think part of what we can do as advisory board members, and I'm glad to hear the deadline might get extended a week, is to serve as trusted messengers and explain in the best way possible to those that we're asking to complete the survey, what our specific role on this advisory board is, why we chose to serve on this advisory board. I mean, we all had to submit an application and we all had to explain why we thought we should be serving on this advisory board, and just to build that trust with the individual that we're asking to complete the survey is really the only thing I can think of as far as overcoming that barrier is concerned.
Thank you. Charlene?
Well, I think also when we're talking about these forums, and I hear the data, right? But I want to go back to Jackie's point, is that, we're asking folks to share or provide feedback on what has either worked or what hasn't, what have been their struggles and challenges, and that, you know, we care about these outcomes. And I think a lot of times folks, you know, and I'm just saying this from my perspective when I worked for parole and, you know, the PAC meetings, and we would, you know, ask them, we would have surveys for them as well. But, you know, some of them would come back with, well, why am I even doing this for you? Why? Is it going to change anything that has happened to me? Is it going to change what's going to happen to somebody else coming out of jail or prison? Because if it's not, you're wasting my time. I'm just being very frank and candid of what the attitude is, because Jackie said it very clearly. We're talking about numbers, yes, but we need, like Andrea is saying, is that we've got to show some compassion and empathy for people that we're asking this information from, and that we want to do something positive with the information and the data so that we can address this issue of recidivism and drug addiction and incarceration. So I think that maybe we frame it, you know, we want to hear, you know, we want to hear your feedback. We want to hear from you. You know, this is your opportunity to, you know, make changes, right? It takes a village.
Thank you. Manuel?
I agree with what's been said so far. I agree with what's been said so far. I think that something that was also brought up to me was the fact that the survey asked, you know, folks if they've been a victim of like it starts off like that. So it doesn't seem to be like it actually wants, like it initially doesn't seem like the survey is being presented as, you know, we want information from folks who have been impacted by incarceration so we can seek alternatives, provide better services. And I think we need to be more intentional about that. I think Robin also posted on the chat, you know, that it would be helpful to provide information to the public about why the forums are being held and how the information will be used for change. Right. I think that's a key piece that needs to be really up in front. And in terms of like ways to support individuals who might not have, you know, the ability to join meetings all the time. I mean, if there's a budget within the project, the research project funding to do so, maybe even providing meals for people who are able to join somehow, like for them and their families, if it's a need that they need, like, you know, if they're taking 2 hours of their time, you know, at 5 p.m. when they're supposed to be cooking, then maybe they need food provided for them so they can actually focus on that.
Yeah, that's not part of the, I could talk to the county and maybe see with the reentry office if there's any funding that way. Yeah, if for anybody who's following Sandag stuff, we're trying to be careful with the buying of food. That was supposed to make you all laugh. Darwin.
I just add, so I've certainly been to many community forums, and so I appreciate what folks are sharing. And even with that being said, I'm still okay with a free for all. I don't think you necessarily control that. We can take out of it what's, you know, we can take out of it in terms of valuable contribution. And I think the other thing I would add is we can also do a part targeted in terms of connecting dots. Since we already have a diversion program and we have people that have gone through it, they can share their experience. Did it help them get on the right track? What worked, what didn't work? Service providers that were working with these folks, how did that experience go? What did they get from it? If we're doing it for adults, what would they recommend? There's all sorts of stuff that we can potentially get from these community town halls. And some of it, of course, won't be something we necessarily anticipate. So I think that's fine. I think our part, we should be clear about like the data we're using, and then whatever, give a snippet of it, and then give people that wanted access to it. And then also clear about our goals. What's our endpoint? And in that sense, so folks know what we're doing and, you know, what's expected out of here. So they have expectations about our work and, you know, where we're going with this.
Great, thank you. Did anybody else have any more thoughts on the community? We're almost at the end of time. Just to kind of finish up the slide. So after the community forums, we're going to be looking at the information on best practices and policies around the nation, state, internationally, trying to better understand. One of the research goals we were directed to answer was individuals who weren't incarcerated. What was their ongoing contact with the system? So trying to track that, looking at what services around the region and understanding need and where are their gaps. And then we're also doing a cost study that's going to look 1, 5, 10, and 20 years out. And we'll be talking to you a lot about that methodology. We're working with the working group right now of understanding the cost of the data with probation, public defender, the sheriff's department, of basically what's, if things stay the same or what they were pre-COVID of incarceration versus investing in services, and what would be the cost savings. So we'll be talking to you about that, but that's what's still ahead with this project. We have 2 more minutes. This has been a really fruitful dialogue, so I appreciate everyone's time here. Please know that that we do, and we're going to take these comments and considerations to heart. Please let me know if you have other thoughts about how we can best communicate with you, because I really feel badly that the community survey sounds like it's not working out for some of the individuals who are doing it. We really tried to give everybody a chance to comment on the questions and the format. So if those opportunities didn't work of getting your feedback, please let me know how, because we did share that with everybody. And I want to make sure that moving forward, everybody feels like they have that opportunity before it's too late and before something's closed like this. So I want to make sure that we get that and figure out the best way to make sure that everyone feels like their contributions are making a difference, because that's where we want it to be. Anybody else? No? Well, thank you so much. I will be following up with that link to the board presentation. This presentation, we'll send out another reminder to the ATI working group about anything you can do to help get the survey out, extending it till June 3rd. And then talking to you more about having some working groups here, and also what those community forums look like. Okay, thank you, everybody.
Thanks, Cindy.
Have a good night.
Everybody. Good night.
Thank you, everyone. Bye-bye.
All right, so I'm just looking at the comments. You're on mute, Cesar?
My bad. Yeah. Anyways, yeah, I have notes, and I've just been making
I'm
sure.
just looking, hold on one second, who's still here? Jonathan Herrera, Albert Perdone. We can talk a little bit more. I just wanted to see,
Okay.
make sure that we're all good on the comments. Were there any?
No,
Is
I
there a
think
way for us to see the comments or save them? I just want to make sure that we
Yeah,
don't lose anything.
I have it saved. I have everything saved. So then, yeah, I got it.
Okay, perfect. Okay, I'll talk to you later, Cesar.
Thank you.
Thank
Have a good
you.
night. Bye-bye.